you don't have any useful skills.
Yeah.
You don't know how to earn.
Yeah.
You got a weird view of sex.
Yeah.
And then you get married and wonder why your life is dysfunctional.
What is up, everyone? We are back with another episode of Shaping the Culture. Let's just get to it. The whole secular sacred divide. There is no distinction in the scriptures. Some of us have trust issues with God, and some of us, it's like, does God really got us? You can't engage the culture with the gospel that first has not engaged you. Like, you know how people are like, oh, that's just who I am. Nah.
Keep. Drop the mic. Drop the mic.
Shaping the code.
I appreciate your flexibility with the dates and making this happen.
Yeah, I appreciate your flexibility. I know you're a busy man too. And so,
hello. I cannot identify as Ethiopian, but you guys have a beautiful culture. And there's a bit of a feud between the Armenians and the Ethiopians in terms of who was the real first Christian nation.
We know the answer, right? You're outnumbered here, bro.
I know. I'm gonna leave it alone. Yeah. But we do got a quarter of the old city in Jerusalem. You know, the Armenians do. Sure. So
you can have that.
Okay. Respect.
We're gonna take the first Christian nation, though.
They don't really like us there anyway.
That's right. Awesome. Well, welcome to this. I actually want to say thank you to you guys for also being flexible with the date change, because I know some of y'all got tickets for the April 8th date, and y'all got tickets for the May 5th date. And so we've been all over the place. So thank you guys for being able to make it happen despite all the
Shout
changes.
out to everybody who got tickets on Black Friday.
Black Friday.
Like Good Friday.
Good Friday. Yeah. We got some real ones. Yeah.
Wrong day. That's the next one.
That's the next
one. Right after Thanksgiving. We're going to come back and do it again.
There it is.
So.
We'll do that. Well, here's what we'll do. For those, again, I'm assuming everybody in here knows who you are, but for those who don't, give us a little life background, a little testimony. Let us know who you are outside of the YouTube game.
Yeah. I am Ruslan Karaoglanov. I am originally from a country named Azerbaijan, Baku. It's just east of Armenia. And so that whole region used to be Armenia once upon a time ago. And me and my family grew up in Azerbaijan. It used to be part of the former Soviet Union way back in the 80s and early 90s. And because we were ethnically Armenian, Azerbaijan is predominantly a Muslim, Arab, Arzi state. And going all the way back to the Armenian genocide by Turkey in 1915. There's always been tension in that region, specifically of a little autonomous region inside of Azerbaijan that's predominantly Armenian. And so all of this led to these pogroms of Baku in the late 80s. My father and all the men pretty much fled. Me and my mom, because we're fair-skinned. My mom's adopted by an Armenian family, so she's Russian or Ukrainian. We're not quite sure. The forever, 23andMe DNA. It's like she could be Ukrainian or Russian. We don't really know. So we stayed back, and we then went and lived in Moscow for a few months before we came to America in the 90s. I grew up in San Diego, very different San Diego than it is now in the early 90s, and predominantly Black neighborhood, fell in love with hip hop music, got into a lot of trouble just because my dad wasn't in my life, and it was pretty rough. Got arrested at the age of 11.
At 11?
At 11,
That's
yeah.
wild.
We were the breaking into houses kids, and thankfully my mom had the foresight to move us to the North County, which you've been to where we're at. We're kind of in a more suburban part, and that kind of set the trajectory for me to turn my life around. Got into basketball, thought I was going to go to the NBA, and then I discovered an Armenian has never made it to the NBA.
How tall are you?
I'm 5'10" and a half. Give me my half. Give me my half.
You got
5'10" and a half. And so never, that didn't work out just because of genetics. And I'm an only child with my mom, so I wasn't like the best team player in the basketball politics. But that led me to pivot over to music, being on a basketball team, freestyling. I got saved around the same time. And after I got saved, like through deconstruction, because Armenians are ethnically Christian, we're culturally Christian. And so like we're the first Christian nation. That's all you hear growing up. But there was all kinds of issues within the church and my experience within church. And so I, through the door of deconstruction in a bizarre way, through apologetics, I read this incredible, huge book called The New Evidence That Demands a Verdict by Josh McDowell. And over a 2-year process of soul searching and dating a Jehovah's Witness girl, dating a Christian girl, having Muslim friends, having, all kinds of different friends, I wrestled and then finally landed at Jesus is who he says he is. Jesus is God. That was a 2-year process. And about a year and a half after that, I met my wife. We got married 4 years after that. 6 years after that, we had our first kid. And within the first 6-month period of having our first kid is when I quit my job, working at my church, and went full-time with music with Dream Junkies back in 2015.
Shout out to Dream Junkie. I got the juice.
You got the juice. Yep. And so that did that for a little while. That faded, and then pivoted to YouTube, and been doing that ever since.
Awesome.
So that's a very condensed, compressed version of the testimony.
Yes. I love it. Well, here's what we're going to do. You brought up deconstruction a little bit. The theme is stand firm. And I want to start off by asking the question, have you ever, I know you entered the faith through questioning the faith, but since receiving the faith, have you ever questioned the faith, wrestled with the faith? Did 2020 throw you off a little bit? Have you ever had a season of wrestle, doubt? And if so, what did that look like, and how did you endure that?
I was fortunate in that I worked out a lot of it on the front end. And I also was fortunate in that I had a lot of mentors early on that were solid, that loved Jesus, that had a high view of the scriptures, but were operating outside of the evangelical industrial complex. So a lot of the stuff that we kind of saw hit the fan, we were talking about that stuff 15 years ago. Like we were talking about like young earth creationists and social issues. Even police brutality, like back in 2004, 2005, we were having these conversations very early on. So I was fortunate in that. And then I was also fortunate I had that foundation, and then I dove really deep into the San Diego slam poetry scene. So if anybody's ever done anything slam poetry related in the secular side, I mean, it's very not Christian, to say the least. So we would have these like debate like poems, where I would do, an atheist would do a poem mocking Christianity. I would write a spoken word poem, come back to the open mic and shred him. So I was fortunate to have these hard conversations, but to also be faced with a lot of the inconsistencies pretty early in that community, which I feel like kind of equipped me. I'm trying to be honest I think I always will wrestle with secondary issues. Right now something I'm thinking through is deliverance ministries, and how does that look, and how do Christians get demonized, and what is that, how does that get flashed? So that's something I'm kind of trying to figure out. I got friends that are on the cutting edge of that world, and then I'm also I don't know about all that, So that's something that I'm deconstructing, reconstructing, trying to figure out right now. So I think I'm always thinking about things, yes, but they're always non-essentials. And by non-essentials, I mean, I'm not questioning the bodily resurrection of Jesus. I'm not questioning if Jesus is God. I'm not questioning if the scriptures are inspired. I can go down the rabbit hole of textual criticism and watch those, and how many different manuscripts are there, and how did we get all that stuff is super fascinating to me, but none of it changes the foundation. And it's almost like I look at faith through the lens of my own transformative, regenerated experience. Faith is not the same as certainty, but you can be certain about the things that you've walked through in faith.
Yeah, that's good.
That's So I can't be I am certain that Jesus rose, and I have video footage that we can put on Instagram. That would be certainty, right? But what I am certain is in me placing my faith in Jesus. That he did something to my heart, and in hindsight, I am certain that he is who he says he is.
That's good, man. That's good.
And so it's almost try Jesus, not me.
Yeah,
right.
That's
Shout out to Toby.
Toby. I love that. Yeah.
If we flesh that out, I think that's the beauty in the conversation, because we can get into the particulars and all that stuff, but has Jesus transformed your heart?
Yeah, that's powerful. I'm fascinated by your testimony because it's unlike most people's testimony. I think in our culture, this is a generalization. I know Yoni doesn't like generalizations, but
I love generalizations. They exist for a reason.
they exist. Thank you, Ruslan. We got that on tape. Generally speaking, in Christian culture, we celebrate conversion, but we don't know what to do with discipleship.
It's good.
Jesus says, go and make disciples of all nations. He doesn't say go and make converts. Yep. And I think, conversion is powerful, and it's, we should celebrate that and we should pursue that. But the question is, do we know what we've been converted to?
Yep.
Do we know what we believe? And it sounds like, and I think about Jesus too. He says, who builds a house before considering what it takes to build a house? Yeah. Jesus says, the foxes have holes, birds have nests, the Son of Man has nowhere to lay he's letting his disciples know, before you say yes to this, let me break down what you're saying yes to.
Yeah, that's good.
And so there's this discipleship process, and I see that with your journey too. Why do you think discipleship is not, do you agree with me that discipleship is not celebrated or is not at the forefront of the conversation in Christian culture? And if you do agree with me on that, why do you think that is an issue?
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. Yeah. I think discipleship is doing life with someone that's a season ahead of you. And sometimes it doesn't have to be this formal, I am discipling you. Like we see discipleship and everybody thinks you gotta act like Jesus to certain people and you need to be, underneath someone. Yeah. And I don't think it's always that overt and linear. I've discipled tons of people. Seldom have I said, I am discipling you. I've led a lot of people personally to Jesus. Seldom have I ever said, I led him to Jesus, right? So it's like this weird thing where I think sometimes people can get weird about it because it can get weird. It can be abused. It could be weaponized. But yes, I think foundationally, discipleship is a huge aspect of it. And I would just reduce it to doing life with someone that's a season ahead of you. So my wife has women who are in their late 40s who have teenagers, and she does life with them. That's discipleship. And there's wisdom she gleans about what it's like dealing with an 8-year-old and a 2-year-old, right? And there's value there. So I would say on the most foundational level, and we don't really have that in church. Like if you think about the evangelical experience, I don't know, everyone's here not an evangelical, but you have big church, and then you have youth group, and then you have junior high group, and everyone's kind of segregated. I don't know if that's always the best model, right? Now, I get it. Having 6th graders and 12th graders in the same room in a youth group could be weird, right? But if you have the older men pouring into the teenage boys and there's this multi-generational thing happening, I don't think it has to be as overt. So yes, I would say yes. Why? I think because we don't have a healthy demonstration of it. And I think sometimes the people who are really into it just get weird and abuse it. It's just we're going to sit down every Monday at Chick-fil-A at 6 a.m. and I'm going to walk you through this book. What, bro? Can we just hang out?
Yeah, that's right.
Can we just I don't know, have some keto cookies?
Keto cookies.
I can't
Shout out to Ruslan, by the way. You see how the weight he dropped?
So, yeah,
I love that. So a lot has happened in the last 2-3 years. You have done a phenomenal job on your channel, doing your best to address some of these things and offer truth and hope. What do you think our Christian culture needs right now? What do you think we're struggling in, and what steps do we need to take to start overcoming some of the demons that we're facing?
Oh man, that's a loaded question.
It is, yeah.
I think there's a lot.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot. I think
top two.
In your
mind.
I think there is an ideology that has crept into a lot of our psyches from sources and principalities that we don't even know the origin of. And I think it's shaped a lot of how we think and view things. And I think it's prevalent all over the world, and it's crept into the church. And so I think offense is at a very all-time high. I think a lack of charity is at an all-time high. I think people blaming the outside system for internal decisions or lack of decisions that they've made is at an all-time high. And I think a lot of that is this spirit of the air that's really has done a number on people's worldview. And so I think there's a part of the deconstruction is a lot of people wrestling with a biblical worldview, which is deny yourself, pick up your cross, follow Jesus, and a secular, I don't even want to say secular, but a worldly worldview that's what you feel is superior. Your truth is the truth. And how dare anyone judge you or tell you that you can improve in your life.
Wow.
And I think those two, I would say that that's the biggest thing. I think those two things are at war with each other right now.
Yeah.
I would say what led to that is a lack of empathy from the church for certain demographics of people, marginalized people, and being cold-hearted. And so now if I don't feel like I belong with the Christians, well, maybe the Marxists that want to disrupt the nuclear family, maybe I'll go with them.
Wow.
Because they're at least addressing the problems.
Right. That's good.
Yeah.
This reminds me of Jesus' priestly prayer in John 17, where he says, the world will know that you are my disciples by the way that you love one another.
Yes.
And I feel like in today's day and age, the way we try to do apologenetics.
Hey, I'm using that. Matt, I'm using that.
Yeah. The way we try to do apologenetics is, let's put on a big conference. Let's invest in these great lights. Let's put on a concert. We love programs. These are the things that we hope to win people over with. But Jesus laid out the formula for us. He's like, what's going to attract people to who I am is empathy. It's love. It's unity. And so I guess my question for you is, why do you think we have deviated away from Christianity 101?
Yeah. Wow. It's a great question. Why have we deviated? I think
for some of the reasons.
I think there's a power dynamic involved when you talk about the institution of what churches became in America. And when power gets consolidated, it can just get weird. And I think there's a lot of people that don't know how to process that, from the celebrity pastor aspect all the way down to the church that's been around for thousands of years. It's a weird power imbalance. And so I don't know how we've deviated, but I think we definitely need to get back to it. And I think that ultimately love, and by the way, and love isn't always peaches and like, I'm not going to be confrontational and soft with you. Sometimes love is telling somebody the hard truth. Because I love you, I have to tell you, if you keep doing this, you will self-destruct. That is loving, right? So I think, but it's in a lot of sense how you say it. It's the context in which you say it. And so I think we've deviated, but at least we know what true north is, right? Like at least we know what true north is. I think the internet has compounded it. Because now everyone has a voice. And it's like people who may have rough day-to-day experiences can go and vent in comments and tweets, and it's cathartic and it feels good. And then what happens from a content creation standpoint is this concept called audience capture. So the best content is us versus them. And so people are upset, some of them rightfully so. So now I'm just going to keep feeding them red meat over and over again. And whether or not I really all the way agree with what I'm saying doesn't matter, because I know it's going to get views and engagement. And that's across the board. I don't care if it's Sean King or Ben Shapiro. You giving red meat. Look at this. Everybody be outraged right now. Stop what you're doing. And then there becomes this like euphoria of outrage porn. Wow. And I think that the church totally falls into it, Yeah.
That's real. And I think there's something about desensitization as well. When you're online and you're constantly being fed the outrage, before you know it, you think the outrage is the right response to whatever it is that we're facing as a nation. We've been doing this tour, and we were in Minneapolis yesterday, and something KB said was, we were not meant to have the heart to handle all the problems in the world.
Yeah, he's spot on.
And I think one of the reasons why we've lost our empathy, or why we've been desensitized, or why we feed into the outrage is because we open ourselves up to something that we were never called to be opened up to. And so now you're on Twitter and you're confronted with issues all over the country and then all over the world. and you don't know what to do with yourself. It's like, I want to care, but I don't care because I am bombarded.
Yes.
And so the easy thing to do is outrage or what have you. Speak to something I've really appreciated about you is, you are a man of discipline. You are someone that does the right things and the hard things. You talk about, eating right or working out, things of that nature, getting your money right. Talk about the necessity for discipline in our spiritual formation so that we can curate and cultivate the heart that we need to be the kind of disciples that Jesus called us to be.
I mean, the core root of disciple is discipline, right? And discipline doesn't mean like white knuckling it. Discipline is not like, I'm just going to deny myself all sources of dopamine.
Yeah.
Right? Because that ain't going to work.
Yeah, that's right.
Discipline is creating systems with the right sources of dopamine so that you can actually flourish. Right? So you take something like, we're going to go here.
Let's go here. That's why we're here.
Children in the room? No? You take something like sex.
Okay.
Right? Sex is an amazing, beautiful gift from God.
Yeah.
Right? Everyone is hardwired, or mostly everyone, I'm going to speak in generalities, right? Mostly everyone is hardwired to desire intimacy in that regard.
Yeah, that's right.
The world tells you, have it with whoever you want to have it with, do it whenever. You're just a highly evolved animal. And of course you want to have pleasure. Right? God says, no, I have actually made this for a specific context and a specific covenant with a specific person.
Yeah.
And the pathway of God will actually lead to more pleasure. So it's not that I'm white knuckling discipline to don't think about sex, don't think about sex, don't think about sex, don't think about sex, don't think about sex. It's that I'm creating outlets that are healthy and productive to get me to the ultimate thing that I want. And that empirical data backs up as true, which is the people most satisfied sexually are the people who are in Christian marriages, who practice their faith with lower amounts of partners that stay committed to each other.
Yeah. That's good.
That's great. Think about that for a second.
Yeah.
The world says variety.
Yeah.
The data says less variety increases your satisfaction.
Yeah. That's good.
The more variety, the less likely you are to be satisfied. I say this with a disclaimer and the caveat. Please hear me that if you have a testimony like I have a testimony, there's grace and there's mercy. But there are realities we're going to have to deal with. So the world is like, variety, go out, do your thing, right? Have as many partners as you want, this and that. God is like, no. One partner for the rest of your life. And then when you look at the data of who's the less likely to get divorced, who's the the more likely to be satisfied, it's the people who live with restraint. Right. So we're denying ourselves dopamine indefinitely. We're doing it in a way that is actually optimal for our flourishing.
It's good.
And then if you do marriage the way God recommends you do marriage, or the way the scriptures outline, if you love your wife the way Christ loved the church, lay down your life for her. If you lead your family well, right? If you provide for their needs, all of a sudden there develops over time this safety and this exploration and this amazing union, and surprisingly it gets better. All of it gets better. And again, the world doesn't talk about that. Right? And so, and this is applicable to anything. This is applicable to food. Like, yes, I lost weight, but you don't think I have dessert anymore? Bro, I had 2 keto cheesecakes yesterday and I ate my wife's other half today.
Keto cheesecake.
And I got up and was still lower on the scale. You see what I'm saying? So it's not that I'm living this life where all I eat is broccoli and chicken. But when you primarily eat broccoli and chicken, then you can have the dessert and it not affect you negatively. It could actually fuel you to your purpose.
That's so good. That reminds me of what Jesus says. He says, I have come to give you life and life to the fullest. And I think sometimes like I struggle in my faith, or I've seen friends struggle with their faith because deep down, the struggle is I just don't think that God's way is the best way. I just feel like I got to try it that way. I got to do it this way to truly increase in pleasure or satisfaction. but speak to somebody once said, the root of all of our sin is unbelief.
Mm-hmm.
So when we do something wrong, deep down, we believe that what God says about it is not true.
Yeah.
And we believe that there's a greater truth. And that's why I'm obeying that or subscribing to that.
Yes.
So if we have a sin issue, we have an unbelief issue,
good, yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so oftentimes I have found in my life that doing it God's way isn't the best way.
Yeah.
And I've got to figure it out on my own.
Yeah.
But as you're talking, the data shows that God's way is always the best way. I think about David, who says in the Psalms, when I kept secret my sins, my bones wasted away.
Yep.
Science and data tells us today that secrets are associated with heart disease.
Come on.
That if you keep secrets to you, if you do not confess your sin, there's mental issues that can arise from that. So the data says we were not meant as humans to keep things in the dark. We were called to bring things to the light. And so science is on God's side, but there is this struggle that God's way isn't always the best way, that God's way isn't leading to everlasting life.
Yes.
Can you speak to maybe what we need to do, or maybe a step or two we can take to trust God at his word and know that he can be trusted?
Well, I think, one, we have to discover what God's ways are. So some of us have a distorted theology. Like, even when we started talking about sex, some of y'all are like, it's dirty. It's dirty. It's gross. So save it for your husband. What? Wait a minute. That doesn't make any sense. Right? So we have a bad theology around that. And dig this, and this is how we do it. And I'm not speaking in absolute theological statements, but then the distorted theology is there's a whole book that Jewish boys weren't even allowed to read till they were older called Song of Solomon.
Yeah, that's right.
And if you read that is an erotic book.
It is.
And then what do? Some Christians, not all, but some take it and be like, yeah, that's really about Jesus in the church. Like, what? Huh? Do you understand what's going? Like, read it in a modern translation. Don't read the KJV. Read it in something you could understand.
And the message, if you have to.
Right? So we'll take it and so we'll distort the ways of God because we don't have a healthy theology of the Word of God.
That's good, man.
And I'm not, again, if you view Song of Solomon as allegorical, like, I'm not throwing stones. I just think you're wrong. And weird. Okay. But if you have a healthy, robust theology of sex, of money, right? We struggle with finances, and then there's a whole book called Proverbs, pretty much about finances. Right? Live on less than what you make. Pay off your debts. Work your land. Don't chase fantasies. Plant for another season. You know, like all these different, the best self-help advice is in Proverbs. There's a whole book about it. And then we'll be like, well, you know, Jesus said that it's harder for a rich man to enter the eye of a needle. And it's like, are you reading that passage in context?
Right.
Are you reading that there was a rich man's grave who was a follower of Jesus, who Jesus was buried in his tomb? It was a rich man that, right? And it's not to divert to a prosperity gospel, but I think some of us have a poverty gospel.
That's right.
And then when you got a poverty gospel, you're like, well, what's the point? I mean, I'm just going to be average. I'm just going. And so I got a distorted view of sex because I think Song of Solomon is about me and Jesus. I got a distorted view of money because the rich man, right? And you're reading Acts wrong. They sold everything. No, they sold and gave what they wanted. And then when Ananias and Sapphira got caught, it was because they withheld. And Peter tells them, you could have said, keep all of it, keep some of it. You didn't have to. Why you lied? That's why they died. So we got a distorted view of money. And then all of these theological ways are actually not God's ways. Where we have a distortion of Scripture, and then when you think about it, okay, well, what is it? Where is that full life that you talk about? It's going to be on the other side of living a life of restraint, having a healthy relationship with these things, living on less than what you make, staying out of debt, saving up, having an emergency fund. Why? So that when you get married, you can have the type of life when you have kids that your wife can stay home if she wants to. By the way, 56% of women surveyed who work would have preferred to stay home if given the opportunity to. Thank you, ladies. This is Gallup. I didn't make this. This is Gallup surveyed working women with kids under 18. With kids under 18.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's right. That's the key. Yeah.
56% of working women, not Christian women, not conservative women, not pro-life women, working women with kids 18 and under would have preferred to stay home had they been given the opportunity to. Maybe not forever. Right? I would love to see how those numbers look for kids 5 and under.
Right?
Yeah. So here's what the data's saying.
Yeah.
And then we're like, yo, you don't have any useful skills.
Yeah.
You don't know how to earn.
Yeah.
You got a weird view of sex.
Yeah.
And then you get married and wonder why your life is dysfunctional.
That's good, man. Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
you get up under some healthy teaching of what God's ways are.
Right.
And then you can change and create an environment where, hey, I feel close for women. I feel close to my husband and I want to be intimate because I feel like we're protected and we're stable.
Right.
Not, yo, if we get a flat tire, we can't make the rent.
Yeah.
You living your life on the edge.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Right? And so, of course, she's not going to want to be as intimate with you.
Yeah.
Right? And then you got men coming in with a distorted view of I'm going to marry the Christian porn star. We're going to get it on 6 days a week.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like, bro, if you marry fellas, hear me. I know we're getting explicit. Fellas, listen to me.
This is LA.
I know, right?
We're here,
I got
bro.
a whole nother
We're here.
thing on that. Fellas, if you marry a woman that hasn't been promiscuous, it's going to take a while to find your rhythm in that department. If you marry a virgin, it may take even longer. It may hurt for a while. You have to be sober about this. So you thinking you about to just jump in and 6 days a week, and it's like, bro, it was hard for me and my wife.
Right.
It took us years to find our rhythm, you know?
Yeah.
And so to answer your question, we don't know the ways of God.
That's good.
Because we don't know the word of God.
Yeah.
And if we can learn the word of God,
That's
then
good,
we will
man.
discover the ways of God.
Yeah.
And if we walk in the ways of God, and the ways of God are so good that even non-Christians can get in on this.
Yeah.
If non-Christians handle their money God's ways, live on less than what you make, develop some useful skills, learn what your land is, save up for a rainy day, they will get the same benefits, right? That's how good God's ways are.
Yeah.
If we live God's ways, then we will always be in God's will. We think God's will is this fork in the road destination of what is my purpose.
Yeah.
It's like your purpose is to know God and make him known.
That's good, man.
But if you're in the ways of God, you will be in the will of God, and your will of God the will of God for your life may change per season. Your assignment may change, your vocation may change, but you'll be splat in the middle of where you're supposed to be. We equate purpose and all this with work, which is very rude if you think about it.
Yeah.
You meet people and you're like, so what do you do? I'm a husband.
Yeah.
What else you do? I'm a father.
Yeah.
What else? Why is right? So we got this
That's
distorted
good,
view of
man.
work with purpose.
Yeah.
And so if we know what the word of God says, we'll know what the ways of God's are. And then if we do what the ways of God's are, we'll be in the will of God.
Yeah.
Do all of that. Do all of that through
Yeah.
your deconstruction. Try this. Do all of that through your deconstruction.
Yeah.
Do that for a year. Go to church, be generous, be committed, get discipled, live your life with restraint, learn how to handle your money, learn how to handle your sexuality. Do that for a year, and all the hard questions, you could have those. I don't care if you think Genesis was literal or, right? I don't care. But do that for a year and tell me you don't see radical impact on your life.
That's good, man. That's so good.